Guys, it's the end of week 3, week 2 for you at Learn From Home, and I just want to take this opportunity to go over a few reminders and then talk about what we should have learned this week. So here I am on the Google Classroom. If you want to come to the Google Meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 7:35 to 8:20, you click on this link right here on Google Classroom. I will be there every Monday, Wednesday, Friday just to answer questions. If you're struggling with how do I do a drag and drop, I don't understand what the video was telling me, or I'm having some technology issues, this is where we can work those things out. Notice I posted the announcement classroom code. Instead of using Remind, the school has to use Google Classroom now. So definitely go and join that to get all the announcements the school will send out. I'm going to click on the classwork tab because this is where all of our classwork is. That makes sense. So up to this point, we've gone through 4 topics. We've gone through atomic model, ions and isotopes, valence electrons, and metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. Each one of those has a lesson check. Before you take that lesson check, you should do your assignments for that lesson. So if I'm going to take the 1.4 lesson check today, I need to make sure I've at least watched the video for metals, nonmetals, metalloids, and probably done a few of the assignments before I even attempt that lesson check, or else it's not going to work out very well. Same thing for the quiz. There's going to be a quiz posted in a few minutes this morning. That's over 1.3 and 1.4. If you haven't done those lesson checks and gotten grades back on those, I would not take the quiz yet. Wait until I've graded your lesson checks and given those back so you can look back through them, see what you missed, maybe ask me questions, and then we can go in and take the quiz. If you're worried about submitting these things exactly on time, don't worry about that. I had someone message me last night saying they couldn't get the 1.4 stuff done, and that's completely okay. Now what we're not going to do is sit there and have 3 weeks worth of assignments that we have to do because we haven't even attempted any of them. We are not going to do that because that will put you in a bad place. But if you need to fall a day behind, I'm perfectly okay with that. You can complete this stuff at your own pace. But we do sort of need to be, good about trying to catch up. And pretty much, messaging me and letting me know that you're trying to catch up as well. That goes a long way. So if we need to go back and do or redo any of these assignments, lesson checks, the assignments, maybe go back and redo that quiz. Next week is basically going to be a review week. We're going to have a test next Friday, August 21st. I lied, August 28th. Today's the 21st. And it's going to be over these 4 topics. So next week, there'll be 4 assignments, no videos. The 4 assignments are over each of these topics. And you have 4 days to complete those review assignments. You also have that time to go back and redo any of these assignments that you may have missed. And definitely come to those Google Meets in the morning and ask me questions. So with that being said, what should we have learned this week? Okay, first topic was valence electrons. First, we should know how we organize electrons around a nucleus. We start from the inside and work our way out. The first shell or energy level outside the nucleus can only hold 2 electrons. So if, let's say we have lithium that has 3 electrons, you fill up the first 2, and then you move to the next shell and put the extra 3rd electron there. When a shell is full, you move out to the next one. So if I filled up that next shell with 8, then I would have to move out to the next one if I had any more electrons. Any electron on the outermost shell is a valence electron. The electron bingo activity was actually great at going over all of this. So first, can we figure out the number of electrons something has from the periodic table? Remember, that comes from the atomic number because it's the same as the number of protons. Can I organize them in the correct way on a diagram? They were numbered for you, so you should have started at 1, then went to 2, then went to 3, and in that order. And then finally, when you're done, you look at the very outside shell that has electrons, and you just count how many electrons are on that outermost shell, and those are the valence electrons. The valence electrons are going to be very, very important when we get to our next unit, which is after next week. We talk about how do these elements actually bond together to give us most of our compounds we deal with in daily life. So valence electrons, very important. I have to know, how do I get that number? We're not going to sit there and draw out the atoms every time, though, because that would take way too much time. So how do we get valence electrons from the periodic table? There's a shortcut. It comes from the group number. If you notice these numbers on top, you got 18 of these columns, and those columns are called groups. So look at the first group. The first group is column or group 1. You'll remember that all these elements in group 1 have one valence electron. That's easy to remember. The group number tells you. What about group 2? Group 2, go figure, has 2 valence electrons. We skip all these in the middle valley because we're not in chemistry. These are what we call transition metals, and these have a differing number of valence electrons depending, so that's complicating it way too much for us. We skip all these in the middle, and we jump to the other side of the cliff, or the other side of the valley. And group 13. You may remember that boron has 3 valence electrons. Well, how am I going to remember that if the group number is 13? Is there a 3 in 13? There sure is. So boron has 3 valence electrons. Let's go to the next group. Carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, lead. They're all in group 14. There's a 4 in 14, so they all have 4 valence electrons. Group 15. There's a 5 in 15. This group has 5 valence electrons. 16. There's a 6 in 16. All these elements have 6 valence electrons. 17, there's a 7, so they have 7 valence electrons. And then all of these in group 18, there's an 8 and 18, so they all have 8 valence electrons, or a full outer shell. The only exception, helium. Helium only has 2 electrons, but it does have that full shell because the first one only takes 2 electrons. So that's why it's grouped over here, because all of these have a full outer shell. Helium, though, only does have 2 valence electrons. Okay, so that's all about valence electrons. Metals, nonmetals, metalloids. This is probably the easiest thing so far because the lesson check grades have looked nice. We have to know the properties of each. What's brittle? What's malleable, which means I can bend it? What's ductile, which means I can draw it into a wire? Which one's shiny? Which one's dull? Which ones are mostly solids? Which ones are mostly gases? What can be sort of both? Like what can be a semiconductor in certain conditions? I have to know those properties. Those come from the videos. And then, where are they on the periodic table? Here's just a really, really, really basic picture of what we should either have saved from Google or colored in ourselves. Everything in yellow here is a metal. So a majority of the periodic table is a metal. This little sliver of purple right here, those are metalloids. Sorry about that. Everything to the right of the metalloids is a nonmetal, and those are colored in green. The only exception is hydrogen over here. Hydrogen is a nonmetal, but remember we group it over here because it has 1 valence electron, and that tells us how we group these in groups. So how can I remember which ones of these are metalloids? Well, let's go to the periodic table that I posted on Classroom. If you don't know where that is, it's under classwork. It's labeled periodic table and references. If I open this up, of course it's sideways, sorry about that. Look at this bold line right here. We're just going to say for this class, everything touching that bold line is a metalloid. That means we're going to consider boron, aluminum, silicon, germanium, arsenic, antimony, tellurium, polonium, astatine. All those are going to be metalloids for us. If one of the sides is touching that bold line, that is a metalloid. Anything to the right is a nonmetal. Anything to the left is a metal, except for hydrogen. So I hope this is a good review of the week and helps us before we take this quiz today. And please, please, please message me if you have any questions. I try to keep on top of grading, and it's just really hard to find the time to try to message each one of you individually. And for those of you who haven't really submitted anything yet, expect to hear from me in the next week. So Enjoy your weekend.